Hi, and welcome to this second video about the serverless framework. In this video, we will create two Lambda functions, an API gateway, and connect the two Lambda functions to two different endpoints in the API gateway. The theme of this API is, as always, birds. Before we continue, if you find my videos interesting and want to learn more about serverless and AWS, please consider subscribing to my channel and smash that bell icon to get notified when I publish more content. Now let's get started. First, create a new empty folder and open it in your editor of choice. Next, we can create a serverless.yaml file and a functions folder to contain the code for our Lambda functions. One function should accept a JSON object and return a status 200. The other should take an ID as input and return a JSON object from a list matching that ID. The logic of the Lambda functions is not important to this video, so I'll just copy some Python code I have written beforehand. I'll provide a link in the description if you want to have a look at the code for this video. Now that we have written the code for the Lambda functions, we can write the serverless configuration. First, let's write the name of our service or application. I'll call mine serverless-birds-v1. Next, we need to write some provider config. The provider name should be AWS, runtime should be Python 3.8. I prefer using EU Central 1 as region, but you can of course choose another. And the last provider config we want is the Lambda hashing version. And as it says in the serverless documentation, this should for now be 2020-12-21. Now to the Lambda function config. When using serverless, you should provide the config for all Lambda functions under the functions key. Here you provide a key for each function, which will be the name of your Lambda function. So I'll create one called createBird. Here we need to configure two properties, handler and events. Handler is a reference or local path to the Lambda function code. And under events, we should configure what type of event should trigger the Lambda function. A Lambda function can have multiple triggers, so write each trigger as a YAML list object. So, to create and configure the API gateway, just write HTTP and inside write the path to the endpoint, which should be /birds. Then we need to provide the HTTP method, which should be post since this is the createBird endpoint or Lambda. This may look a little bit like magic, since the API gateway is never explicitly defined. But you don't need to, because serverless understands that you need an API gateway by looking at the Lambda events, and creates it for you. Now we just need to do the same thing for the other Lambda. Just define a new Lambda function name under functions, which should be getBird. Then copy the config from the previous function config and update the handler value to point to the correct Lambda code. Now we also have to update the path. If you remember, you should be able to get a bird object by providing an ID. So after the /birds, write /curly braces ID to define ID as a path parameter. Finally, change the HTTP method to get. Now we have all the necessary config and we can finally deploy our serverless application. So just write serverless deploy in your terminal and wait for everything to be deployed. If we go over to the AWS console and navigate to API Gateway, you can see that serverless has created a new gateway with the name we provided under service. And if we open the gateway, we can see that we have two resources, the get endpoint and the post endpoint. Serverless didn't just create the API gateway, it also deployed it. So if we take a look at the output in the terminal, you can see the URL where you now can access this API. So now that we have created an API gateway and attached 2 Lambda functions to it, what's next? Well, what about adding some IAM policies to each of the Lambda function roles? Because now these Lambda functions can't do very much, and maybe we want them to have access to a DynamoDB table. This is all to come in the next video. So until next time, happy coding!